Welcome to the last day of our conference. It is my great pleasure to introduce our last plenary speaker, Professor Anita Peti Stantić, who is well known to all the members of our society since she was our president from 2011 to 2013. A well-known name in Croatian linguistics. She's a professor and the head of the Department for South Slavic Languages and Literatures of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences in Zagreb. Her research interests include sociolinguistics, cognitive linguistics, in particular the information structure. She spent 2 years at the Center for Cognitive Studies at Tufts University, working with Ray Jackendoff on the hierarchy of grammatical structures. She has also worked with Keith Langston on language policies and language planning. She is the author or co-author of 5 books, editor or co-editor of 8 books, the co-author of 1 textbook, and co-author of a number of articles in referee journals and of many book chapters. At present, she is the head of the MegaCrow project, involving scientists from several countries. So I could go on, but I think we are here to hear what Anita has to say, so the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I didn't expect so many of you to be here this morning, but thank you very much for coming this early. I have to say in the beginning, I feel very privileged to be able to speak in this conference, and I thank organizers for that, especially after 2 amazing days of talks and everything that we learned. I'm going to talk today a little bit about languages in the mind, as you see, the systematic variability of agreement and word order interface options. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But before, I want to tell you what's the plan. So first, I will speak very briefly about mental grammar, then about variability of interface options, just in this one little window that we are investigating as part of our project, and then I will present 3 experiments, and in the end I will try to show you how we can semantically modulate agreement, which is meant to be, of course, very morphosyntactic feature. In the end, if we have time, I'll tell you something of what we do and what we did so far and what our plans are for the project of mental grammar in Croatian. I want to tell you before I start that we publish everything in open access on our webpage, which is written here. So Mega.hr, FFZG, this is our university, and then UniZG. So this presentation is going to be there today or tomorrow, so you don't have to write anything that's in the presentation, just to know. So when we speak about the mental grammar, we can of course speak of 2 things. We can speak either of mental grammar or mental lexicon, but to my mind and to my understanding, speaking of mental grammar or mental lexicon as 2 distinct things is actually something that's not how I see it. Basically, I call it mental grammar, some other people call it mental lexicon, but in past, I would say 10 to 15 years maybe, people came to an agreement that grammar and lexicon are not as distinct as we used to think. Especially from my point of view, since my starting point, I would say theoretically, is parallel architecture, Ray Jackendoff's parallel architecture, where you have some kind of continuum between words and rules. Why is this so? This is so because in parallel architecture, what you see is a word that's tripartite structure between 3 modules, one being phonological, then morphosyntactic and semantic, and this is, so the word is intersection of all 3 to begin with, and you go bit by bit from, let's say, regular words, regular expressions to irregular expressions. We've been discussing that over some talks here too. So you go from idiosyncratic to idiomatic to something that would be I would dare to say metaphor maybe, and then regular grammatical rules. So this is seen as a continuum. In that sense, when I say mental grammar, I really mean mental grammar and mental lexicon. So to me, there is no difference between mental grammar and mental lexicon. This is to some extent relevant to this talk, so I just wanted to clarify this. Further, when we speak about mental grammar, of course, we have to ask ourselves what is the role of universal grammar and how universal grammar plays in our mind. I'm really sorry that Eva is not here, but she asked me to send her this presentation. I love one of her articles. This is this one. Different speakers, different languages, where she speaks about individual differences and language attainment. Received knowledge, so to say, is that all learners converge on the same grammar. We speak sometimes about possible differences, how we acquire first language and second language, and we might see some differences there. But what's relevant, Eva showed that this is a myth. And how we know that this is a myth is a very simple thing, and it's sometimes very hard to understand how we didn't see that before. But you know, sometimes it takes one person to clarify things. So if you think of very simple, let's say, morphosyntactic or syntactic issues, we will all more or less agree on them. But when we come to more complex things, when we start asking more complex questions, both morphosyntactic and semantic, we don't agree anymore. And we can't say that we are mistaken. We can say that there is some variability. If there is a variability in what we produce, we have to ask ourselves what's inside there. So how this, what we produce, goes hand in hand with something that's in our mind. So if we would all have the same grammars, there would be, first of all, no need, second, for experiments. Second, our experiments will reveal the same grammars, and that's not the case. So today I'm going to show you some of the examples how we can show that on very, very simple examples. So mental grammar can be taken, of course, as a theoretical abstract construct, what we usually do. But at the same time, the concept of mental grammar plays a role in processing. And I've singled out here several processing questions that I think might be relevant. You might find some another ones, but these are relevant for my research. First would be which part of the language knowledge is stored in our memory and which part of the language knowledge we construct on the spot for every single thing we do. Then, which part of language knowledge is common to all speakers of the language and which is subject to variability. We can speak about this one, again, from the theoretical point of view, but also from something that's very relevant in Croatia. This is normative point of view. So if we agree that there is some part of linguistic knowledge that's common to all, that might be subject to normative arrangement, but not everything. And this is, I think, from my sociolinguistic investigations, this is the part where we go beyond and much, much more than we would need to. Then, the third one, which part of the language knowledge arises from the universal grammar hierarchy and which is bound somehow to conceptual potential of systematic combinatoriality. And the last one, which building blocks of our mental grammar are universal and which are local. When I say local, I think of two things. One is universal in terms of typologically universal compared to language specific. And then the another one, parts of the grammar that are bound to certain constructions. Again, I go back to what Eva said the first day. when she showed that when we are building mental grammar in our heads, some people are building more general, and some people that are less educated are building just on single examples. So this is also a relevant question. When we talk about interfaces, I can go on and talk for 45 minutes about interfaces, but I'm not going to do so. I think, first of all, of interfaces between phonology, morphology, and semantics. On the other hand, in parallel architecture, there is a possibility to build interface between phonology, what we produce, and semantics directly. This is a new thing compared to classical generative grammar. But variability in interface options, as you know, in generative grammar, were always viewed just as aberration, as something that shouldn't be there and it doesn't interest us. In constructional grammars, as parallel architecture is, this is something that we play around. This is something that really interests us. So we started investigating variability of interface options in agreement. In this first project, coordinated research in experimental morphosyntax of South Slavic languages. This is the project that just ended, I think, 3 days ago on 30th of April. It was Liverhume project that was run by Andrew Nevins. But what is very relevant for our region, I think, we had partners from Nova Gorica, Zadar, Zagreb, Sarajevo, Novi Sad, and Niš. And what we tried to do, we tried to construct and perform experiments in a single manner in these 6 places to show whether there is some difference or not in South Slavic languages. What we did further, we got this project from our Croatian National Science Foundation last year, the building blocks of Croatian mental grammar, constraints of information structure. And I'll show you in the end who is part of this project and what we do. But what I'm going to present today is just one little piece of our work within this project that goes hand in hand with this first that we started with Andrew. So our motivation goes back to Graf Corbett, who says some languages have rules which are basically syntactic. Others rely on a semantic principle, and yet others show interesting combinations of the 2 principles. Gender resolution rules are language specific. Here is the bibliography where he writes about that, but mostly he started speaking about that in the well-known book Agreement that you all know. So our question was, what happens in South Slavic languages when you have to agree and you don't have matching in gender nominals in your coordination? It's well known in the theoretical literature that not that many languages, South Slavic are among them, Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian, Slovenian, and some other languages. When you have coordinated subject, you have 2 MPs that can be, of course, bare nominals or can be something else. They can trigger verbal agreement with the whole phrase, with whole coordination, but also they can trigger the coordination with just one of these. And the question is how this happens, what are the underlying mental grammars, and what really happens. Terminology that's used in the literature is non-coordinated, simple, non-conjoined subjects. Then you have coordinated, complex, or conjoined subjects. And then you have, for the agreement, you have full agreement, resolved agreement versus partial agreement, which is agreement with a single conjunct. I will show you the example so it will be much more clear in what follows. Basic facts in South Slavic languages look as I will show you now. So verbs obligatorily agree with subjects pre-verbally and post-verbally. Agreement with finite verbs, auxiliaries and main verbs are in person and number without exception. Here are the examples. Most of you are Croatians, so this is singular, third person, and it agrees with everything. It doesn't matter in singular whether you have stol, stoj, nasred sobe, so you have your subject first, or you have inverted information structure, nasred sobe, stoj, stol. It doesn't play any role. The same is, of course, for the first person and for every other. When it comes to agreement with participles, they agree in number and gender, and without exception, the agreement is in number, and there are some exceptions, or it's variable, as we would like to call it, in gender. Non-coordinated subjects, so the first group, you have just one subject and you agree with this subject. So you have masculine first, you have feminine first, and then you have neuter first. So this is something that's very easy. With non-coordinated subjects in plural, you have basically the same situation. So this is the easiest table I could get you. When it comes to coordination, with the first very simple situation where you have matching subjects, we already have a problem. So you have in masculine dječak I pas, so the boy and the dog, where you coordinate with masculine. Then you have with feminine, also we coordinate with feminine, and then you have neuter, which is a problem, because what you have, you don't coordinate this neuter with neuter, as you would expect from the previous system. You agree this with masculine, and this is out. So always you will have blue what's okay and red what's not okay in my further slides. So pismo I pero su poslana, you coordinate two neuter singulars. You get your plural. I said this is without exception, but you coordinate with masculine instead of what you would expect normally, neuter. When you go to plural, it's okay again. So I will show you now three types of coordination for masculine, for feminine, and for neuter, so that you see these basic facts, and from there we'll go to more complex questions in coordination. So here on the first side of the slide, you have subject first. In the right-hand side, you have verb first. It doesn't matter. You have masculine coordination, so in singular, in plural, in coordination when combining two singulars, in coordination when combining plural and singular, in coordination combining singular and plural. I mean, these are all possible options, of course. And then plural and plural. So agreement patterns with masculine MPs is repeated to high extent in feminine agreement, but not in neuters. So I'll show you now feminine. Masculine plus masculine always gives masculine. With feminine, you have the same pattern. We try to coordinate these feminines with masculine as we did with neuter, but it doesn't really work. Djevojčica I mačka su zaustavljeni. No. This shows that it should be, masculine should be always in a higher position, at least in generative grammar, and that's what we tested, and it doesn't work. This doesn't work too. This doesn't work too. And so what we have so far is that feminine and feminine always gives feminine. With neuter, this is the first case where you have singular and singular and agreeing with masculine. I already showed that. Then you have plural and singular, you also agree with masculine. Then you have singular and plural, you also agree with masculine. And then you have plural and plural, where you can agree with neuter, but you can also, to some extent, agree with masculine. So you see that neuter agreement is to some extent different from feminine and masculine, and I'll show you further results of our experiments that will fortify this. So our puzzle is, what happens when the coordinated subject consists of two nouns with different gender? Because this is normal situation that we get, of course. Altogether, there are 9 combinations. 3 combinations are same gender, masculine, masculine, feminine, feminine, and neuter, neuter, but 6 are these where they don't match in gender, and we have masculine, feminine, masculine, neuter, feminine, masculine, feminine, neuter, and etc. I have to point right now, because this is very relevant to further, that directionality matters. It's relevant whether masculine is first or masculine is second, especially in types of experiments that we conducted further. So general assumptions are that coordination between same gender noun reveals full agreement in plural. Coordination between different gender nouns results in partial agreement. As you see, if you have masculine, feminine, masculine, neuter, wherever you have masculine, you can have masculine and whatever is the rest. And when you have the situation, this is interesting, when you have the situation when you don't have masculine in your baseline, you can end up with feminine, neuter, or masculine. Mental grammar question would be where this masculine comes from and how much of this masculine, of course, do we have. So theoretical assumptions that we start with are that grammars treat masculine as a default or last resort. This is kind of different, but I don't have time now to go in. We can discuss that in discussion later. If coordination contains masculine, there is significantly higher proportion of masculine agreement. If coordination contains masculine, this is significantly faster if we do E prime or something that measures reaction time. There are some theoretical accounts that say that it would be slower. This is this difference. If we assume that masculine is default, that this is what we choose first, then it will be fast. Then it will be faster. If it's not, if it's last resort, if it's something that we go back and forth, we try to go with feminine or neuter, and we don't find the right agreement, and then we go to masculine. So if it's last resort, it would be slower, of course. So the most interesting conditions, as I said, are feminine neuter and neuter feminine. This is how it looks in hierarchical structure. So you have higher conjunct agreement or first conjunct agreement in SV position. So this is the position where subject is first and verb is second. And then you have closer. This closer is, so to say, our innovation, because hierarchical, generative, and grammars that are of that type always want to go with hierarchy. So closeness of an agreement was never really an issue. This is to show how we would expect in SV situation, subject first, verb second, that there might be some variability because of different mental grammars, and in VS positions, we don't really expect that much of a variability because, as you see, both higher and closer to verb are always the same. So this is just the theoretical assumption. So what we did in our first experiment, there is a controlled experimental study, 6 partner sites. I already said all of this. We performed experimental settings and testing battery more or less the same. And we wanted to perform quantitative analysis on each site and then all together. This was elicited spoken agreement with pre-verbal and post-verbal coordinated subjects. matched and non-matched in gender. Type of experiment was self-paced reading, and it was completion task, so we gave them parts of the sentence. I'll show you the examples. And they had to finish the sentence. We had 30 participants, first-year students. We controlled for everything in our first experiment because we thought we rather control, and none of this mattered really, so we didn't control that much later. There were first-year students, attended the local secondary school. They were not linguists, not students of Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian languages, and the rate between masculine and feminine was 50-50. There were 9 conditions, matched and non-matched, 6 items per condition, 54 test examples, 54 fillers, total of 108 sentences. Model sentences used as primes contain simple non-conjoined subjects in masculine. I had a problem with that, but we agreed on that, so we tried to do something else in subsequent experiments afterwards. Because I thought, you know, if you give them masculine in a prime sentence, it would prime them more to agree with masculine, but okay. You know, when you work in a team, you have to work in a team. This is internal structure. I'll skip that. We controlled for everything, for average length, for comparability between SV and VS conditions. So model sentence looks like this. Prijevod je ovjeren pečatom. Translation, masculine, is authenticated by the seal. And then the phrase that they saw next on the next screen is molbe i rješenja, and they had to agree. They had to repeat the verb from the previous sentence and agree molbe i rješenja. What they produced masculine, feminine, and neuter in certain proportions that I'll show. So these are the results from our first experiment. As you see, I'm just going to briefly say about this. This is VS condition, where we didn't expect much of a difference, and we really don't get much of a difference, as you see, because they agree either with masculine or with feminine or with neuter, whatever is closest and the highest at the same time. Here you see a different situation. So you see that when you have your masculine first, then there is this masculine feminine. There is this huge proportion of masculine because it's first and it's high at the same time in hierarchical sense. But these conditions where you have feminine and neuter, so you don't have masculine at all, you still have rather high proportion of masculine. This is a condition where masculine is not first, but the closer. This is masculine that's next to the verb, and you see the difference between these two and these two, how much more masculine you get when this masculine is close to the verb in comparison to this situation. Second experiment that Jelena, Jana, and me conducted in 2016, this was 2015, this was 2016, was rather similar to 2015, mostly the same sentences. What was different from 2015 is that we tested only SV positions because we already know that VS are of no interest. We didn't want to waste time of our students. We had, again, 54 experiment stimuli and fillers. But what we did, we put adverbs and adverbial constructions in front of the coordination because we were worried that if you put your first conjunct as the very first in a sentence, that you are corroborating your information structure, basically. That's my thing. So if something is first hierarchically and then first in a sentence, it's more prominent, so to say. So we put adverb in front of this just to control for information structure. Presentation of stimuli was a little different. So this is the type of sentence that we tested in the second experiment. It was always some adverb or adverbial construction that was also controlled for length and everything. And what we did, we gave them almost everything because we also didn't want to mess up with memory load. What happened in the first experiment, we had some examples where people didn't answer because they couldn't remember, and you just want to give them as easy as you can. Our fillers were types of sentences that we wanted to say for later and maybe analyze as our real sentences. We didn't yet, but we have them with animals. You see, so we had animals, and here in the fillers we controlled for feminine and masculine. We sometimes gave them as a prime feminine and sometimes gave them as a prime masculine in 54 sentences. So that's not little. When we got results, we sorted out these stimuli in 3 groups, so to say. Stimuli with the coordination between the same gender conjuncts, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Stimuli that include masculine, and stimuli that don't include masculine. Why we did this? I'm going to skip this and show you the same is going to be repeated in this slide. So these are the results for the second experiment. As you see, here are masculine, masculine, feminine, feminine, neuter, neuter. What you get is for masculine, of course, ceiling effect for masculine, masculine. For feminine, feminine, you get some masculines. So some people can even agree 2 feminines in masculine, and with neuter, a little more. This is not statistically significant. When you come to masculine, feminine, and masculine, neuter, this is this situation where masculine is first. You get a lot of this masculine, but again, repeated as the previous experiment, much, much more in a situation when masculine is closer. And this is our situation with feminine neuter and neuter feminine, where you get all 3. This is what you expect. So to break this down, what you have when you have different gender coordination with masculine, so these are the situations: masculine, feminine, feminine, masculine, masculine, neuter, and neuter, masculine. This is the same thing as in a previous slide. So when masculine is close to the verb, you get almost all masculine. When something else is close to the verb, you get something else, a little more. This is around 30-35%. Please remember these numbers. So around 30-35% of neuter and feminine, when feminine and neuter are close to the agreement, to the verb. So when masculine is close, you get almost ceiling effect. There is significant difference between masculine when it's first and when it's close. CCA is closest conjunct agreement. Why this matters? Because if you compare the results for neuter and feminine both to where you have 90% of feminine and 90% of neuter, the result is that you get more of agreement when you have masculine close to the verb than with sole neuter and sole feminine. This is something that's really, really new. So 98.8%. In masculine feminine, you have 71% compared to 96% in feminine masculine. So in the same just reverted situation, this is for neuter. And these results, we believe, strongly point to the direction of closest conjunct agreement, which is something that generative linguists just hate. Because this is not hierarchical, and this is not something that we should be getting as much. We have the third also. So experiment 1 and 2 reveal this interim conclusion. Some gender conjunct agreement and different gender conjunct agreement with masculine point to these conclusions. Being masculine matters, so wherever you have masculine, you have a lot of agreement with masculine. And it's not insignificant number of masculine agreement even in only feminine and only neuter, and linear proximity matters, which is great. I don't like this one, but I do like the second one. So percentage of masculine in closest conjunct agreement is significantly higher than in first or highest. For feminine and neuter, they can gain ground only if they are close. If they are further away or first, they don't get much chance. So, okay, this is different gender agreement. I already showed that, so I can skip this. For experiment 3, what we did this year, just recently, we tested only SV positions. We tested 3 sets of experiments. I performed that with Mirjana Tonković, our psychologist, for 3 conditions. First condition is FM, second condition is MF. I intentionally wanted to test these with M, and the third condition is M and almost all F. So it's semantically grounded a little bit more, this F. I wanted to see whether this helps or not. So the new thing also was that we tested inanimate and animate stimuli, concrete and non-concrete from our database that you heard about yesterday. And then we had 3 conditions, 2 variables and 4 combinations. We had all in all 64 sentences, 16 examples for each, much more than previously. Animate concrete, animate non-concrete, inanimate concrete, inanimate non-concrete. So 3 experiments we performed up to date. We had 90 participants. The stimuli looked like this. First is animate concrete, second is animate non-concrete, third is non-animate concrete, and fourth one is non-animate non-concrete. You can now dwell on whether this is really concrete or not, but I can assure you that we picked examples from the database that was tested previously on 30 people, and so we could do what we could do. What we also did in this experiment, we controlled for the word order of feminine and masculine. So half of our participants saw pametne in feminine and then pametni in masculine, and half of our participants saw vice versa. What we got? Oh, I wanted to show this. I have 3 very neat slides. First is this, second is this, third is this. So I wanted to show you this, and now I'll explain what I have. So these are preliminary results. You have to think of 16 examples that we had. Both for animate and inanimate, concrete and abstract, so far didn't play any role. So you would get in FM condition, so in a condition where M is close to the verb, you would get almost no agreement with feminine. This is just showing you feminine. In a condition where you had masculine first and feminine second, just plain masculine and feminine, again, out of 16, you had for inanimate 3 to 4, and in abstract situation you had a little more in concrete and abstract. Animate, not so much. I have to say that in theory you don't expect this possibility at all. So with animate you can't agree with feminine ever. Ranko Matasović gave a talk at Lingvistički krug recently about that, and we know why. So you don't expect that, and this is just some mistakes, I would say. But here, as you see, I wanted you to remember this 30%. What you get, really, you get 7 out of 16 agreement with inanimates, both in concrete and abstract, which is 44% basically, which is a little more than what we got so far. And more interestingly, you got a number of agreement with animates. So this is your dječaci I skoro sve djevojčice. When you make this feminine that's closest to the verb and animate, when you make it stronger in semantic sense, you get the agreement. This is entirely new, so we never got these results before. So 7 out of 16 is 44%. Statistically significant differences between animate and inanimate. Both concrete and abstract animate with almost all reached the level of inanimate feminines without anything, which was around 30. And theory and typology both entirely reject this possibility. So we got some results that are not accounted for in theory and typology so far. So I will go back to theory a bit. There are at least 3 or 4 agreement strategies, agreeing with the whole coordination, highest conjunct agreement or the first conjunct agreement as a second strategy, and then closest conjunct agreement. Obviously, closest conjunct agreement is widely spread agreement and most efficient in terms of data integration. And reinforcement of this closest conjunct in terms of information structure or however you want to call it raises the chances of this conjunct to be chosen for an agreement. So now I will tell you a little bit about this project that we are going to go further with the experiments and everything that we do in this direction. The project, as I said, is called The Building Blocks of Croatian Mental Grammar Constraints of Information Structure. Theoretical grounding of our work is that Croatian is morphosyntactically rich and interesting language, and we believe that as such it can serve as a testing ground for numerous grammatical relations, especially some that, of course, interest us most, but there are all at the intersection of phonological, morphosyntactic, and semantic conceptual interfaces. Theoretically, this is very important to me. What we follow, so to say, the rule or maxim from Kalikover and Jackendorf's 2012 article, Same Except, because this principle enables you to think gradually, to think in little steps, and that's what we think matters. Because you always take something that you know, and then from this you build the same situation and you change it really in a systematic way, just one bit. Everything is the same except for this little bit, and then again, again, again. So that's why I wanted to show you these 3 consequent experiments to show you how we didn't know much in the beginning. We build our knowledge by doing these experiments. Experimentally, we follow this rule in terms of step-by-step experimentation. And in these agreement results, which are basically our second-year goal, we managed to raise the proportion of agreement with second weaker conjunct by semantically modulating it. In our project, we try to connect quantitative and qualitative research. And what's important, since we have very different people in the project, we try to perform methodologically heterogeneous testing, grammaticality judgment, sentence comprehension. We will work, we didn't start yet, but we will definitely work on typology of errors, because this is another strand that shows us what happens in mental grammar. This is us. So most of these people you know. Before, here was Dario Lečić too, who's sitting there. And on the right-hand side are our international collaborators, Ray, Andrew, Petar, and Motoki. And I want to mention our students who help us a lot with all our experimentations. This is Doris Sulcer and Matko Galić. I want to say that the project enables us, it's lots of administrative work, as you know, But it enables us to do everything that we couldn't do but alone, because there are so many of us and we know different things. So I think that this is important. We put everything in open access. What we did so far, from the corpus Hrvak, we took the words that are more frequent than 3,000 times, and we have objective measures for these 3,000 words, frequency and number of graphemes. We tested on 1,800 participants, concreteness, abstractness, imageability, relative frequency, and age of acquisition. We have all these measures for all these things. So we have minimum, maximum, mean value, central value, standard deviation. Database is in my computer. It's going to be published next week. I just have to go through and couldn't do that before today because I had to concentrate on this. So first version of database is going to be published. We are preparing it right now. We prepared new 3,000 words from Croatian Frequency Dictionary and elementary school textbooks for 4th, 5th, and 6th grades. We are testing for the same measures. And we are testing not only with students, but more importantly, we teamed up with teachers in schools, and they're going to test for us all of these words with 6th graders, so we will have comparable databases for this. At the same time, we are doing experimental research on agreement, ellipsis, and word order. This is what we do. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita, for this very interesting lecture. And now it's question time, please.
Well, at the beginning of your talk, you mentioned the lexicon grammar continuum in Jacob's parallel architecture. You also mentioned that this continuum is one of the basic kinds of construction grammars. But there is one crucial difference between Jacob's approach and construction grammar approach. So I'm interested in what do you think? What is there any difference? And if it is, what the difference is?
In terms of lexical grammar?
Yeah, and defining lexical grammar.
My understanding is that Jacobs took this idea of not making this strong boundary between lexicon and grammar to an extreme. Because as you said earlier, these type of grammars are interested more in idioms and metaphors than in other things that we can explain, let's say, through other means, including maybe generative grammar. So I think their motivation to go that extremely comes from trying to explain very specific constructions. That's all. But I don't know. Do you see?
The main difference is that you said that this lexicon grammar continuum in Jacobs' theory relies on the continuum of words and rules.
Two rules, yes.
In construction grammar, you don't talk of rules. There is a continuum between highly schematic grammatical constructions to the highly specific lexicalized idiosyncratic constructions. Not rules. The accent is not rules.
Right, but
like as it is in every reductionist model, a generative reductionist model of grammar.
I'm only thinking, maybe we differ in what we mean when we say construction grammar, because when I say construction grammar,
you said construction,
I think
that Jacobs' theory is a constructional, maybe, but it is definitely not a construction grammar.
Okay, his theory is definitely constructional. It's cognitive to some extent, so yeah.
Because construction grammars are not reductionist model. They emphasize construction as a whole, not a rule.
You mean
Adele
Goldberg or what?
Goldberg, Croft, Filmer, including language cognitive grammar, which is also construction grammar. But Jacobs' theory is not a construction grammar in that sense.
No, but it is construction grammar, still.
I
mean, he calls it construction grammar.
Maybe I suggest to use another term because it's real enough.
I wouldn't, because he calls it construction grammar.
He can call it as he likes, but it's
I wouldn't agree, but okay. Okay. More questions?
Thank you, Anita. Interesting with all this. I was wondering if you perhaps accounted for in these experiments of if you accounted for dialectal differences.
We did in the beginning. I didn't say anything about that. So we controlled for lots of our students were very offended by our first experiment because we didn't take them. Because they lived somewhere else and then they didn't finish school in Zagreb, and we were supposed to take only those who are from Zagreb. So what we got by controlling so heavily is that, fortunately or unfortunately, in agreement, there is absolutely zero difference between Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia. Not to say that there is difference between our dialects. So we didn't get any difference between Zadar and Zagreb, for example. We didn't get any difference, any significant difference between Zagreb and Niš. So we thought, maybe we shouldn't. One thing that we didn't do, and I would love to do that, is to control for Čakavian, Kajkavian, and Štokavian, because I think that there are bigger differences in agreement patterns in these three than in Štokavian area. So we'll see.
Especially if you do.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. Yes.
I absolutely love what you thought there when you had the construction of sports day, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But I don't know if you have proposed any theoretical explanation for that. It seems to me very obvious that when you basically what you got is usage so you can be making more salient, right?
Uh-huh.
With the more high profile and plus the metonymical.
Absolutely.
And it's just amazing. I mean, it was
yeah, we were not sure what we are going to get, and to my surprise, we got this agreement with animate, which is, the something that points in the direction to be very cautious. That agreement is far from being more of a syntactic issue in Croatian. Yeah. So, Ben?
Actually, this is my question. Great amazing stuff, and I almost thought that. So my question is actually the level of the cultural influences on the agreement preferences. Can you actually correlate some of those with that, or is it just part of the cognitive structure and the memory?
It's funny that you ask.
So, what do you think?
I remember when we pre-tested for first experiment, it seemed, but we were not sure, that there is a difference between men and women. And it was not something that you could say. And in Zagreb results, we got this difference. And we never published anything because I want more data on that. What we got in this last experiment, so women agree more with feminine than men. That's how it is. We don't have enough, but I will get more. And the thing that we got in this third one, we didn't analyze it properly yet, but we got people who vary, and we got people who after first 3 or 4 trials decide on something and they go along with that. So I have to find a way to test this. I can't make general conclusions based on what I have, but I have tracks. Yeah.
Time for thing about that variability discussion in mind, where gender rules will be an issue, but for example, quite recently they recently introduced a new pronoun, personal pronoun. It has been
neutral
around for quite some time, but now there has been a push
admitted to the one language book, reference book that you might call. So, I mean, if there is anything that is going to be normative, this will become slightly normative in Swedish terms. So
right.
Pronoun is in there. And that is a pronoun that is annihilates the difference between he and she. So it's a kind of
neutral.
And I was wondering if somebody had done some research, let's say, on those use of pronouns to see this he or she dominance. 15 years ago, 25 years ago, it was another picture, today it's a different picture, and show that in 10 or 15 years' time, it will again be a different
I
picture.
hope.
So then you can't test it on this kind of thing.
Sure.
But then certainly there must be.
I hope. I don't know if you know this change in academic culture. I encountered this for the first time in States, where lots of professors, males and females, write everything in feminine. When they cite, when they say, for example, the reader did something, they always say she did something. And I was surprised, and it was nice, to see that, because we've been in a masculine culture for so long. So I'm not a feminist in language, but it's nice to get these results. Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you. Well, we're out of time. Of course, we continue the discussion upstairs with some coffee. Thank you.